Well, hey everybody, I'm Nathaniel Dodson from tutvid.com, and today we're going to take a look at flat UI design here in Photoshop, but specifically how to create this little, card, the profile card, whatever you want to call it. I don't know. It'll be kind of cool. It'll be a bunch of fun. We'll talk about colors and shapes and alignment and all kinds of interesting things and techniques that you can use in Photoshop. Adobe does actually have a really great program specifically for UI design. It's called Adobe XD, and it's really super cool, but, everybody knows Photoshop, and not everybody knows Adobe XD, so we're going to roll with Adobe Photoshop, but the concepts can be applied over in Adobe XD as well as just the basic design that we're going to create, but we'll have a bunch of fun doing it. And if you do enjoy this tutorial, make sure you hit that little subscribe button to subscribe to the TutVid channel. That way you never miss any tutorials in the future, and also you can go back and check out all the Photoshop and design tutorials that have come before, it's just a bunch of fun. Let's go ahead and jump into this tutorial. All right, so here we are in Photoshop, and we're going to kick things off by creating a new document, and I'm going to go with the new document that is 2560 by 1440. You can adjust the width and height right there. We're going to create this, and right off the bat, we're going to create a new solid color layer. So come down here and hit the little circle, half white, half black, and choose solid color, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go with a color of F1, 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 which is just a super light gray, and then I will Option or Alt double-click the background layer, and then just drag it down to the garbage. So now this is like our new background. Next, what we'll do is we'll come up here to the Photoshop menu, go to Preferences, and by the way, the preferences are under the Edit menu if you're working on a Windows machine. No worries. We'll go Photoshop Preferences and come down here and choose Guides, Grid, and Slices. We'll open that up, and you can choose whatever color you like. The important thing is this down here, Grid. I'm going to set a grid line every 100 pixels with 5 subdivisions. And this is going to be important, especially if you're following along, because we will be using our grid to measure the shapes as we're creating them. So it'll kind of help you follow along and get exactly what I'm getting. So we'll set our grid, and I also want to come up here under View and make sure that Snap to is turned on, and I will end up snapping to the grid. So you want that to be checked. You can see it's grayed out, but that's because here we don't have the grid. So we'll go Show, and we'll turn the grid on, and now we'll go View, Snap to, and you can see grid is active, it is checked on, and here, this is important, Snap is checked on. If I shut off Snap, there's no snapping at all. I want all my shapes, all my everything here to snap to this grid. So let's begin here using the shape tools. I'm going to grab the rounded rectangle tool, and we want to make sure that we're creating a shape, not a path or pixels, right? And I can click once or I can drag out a shape. I think I'm going to click once because this will allow us to punch in the width and height we want, and then we'll be able to snap it to the grid lines exactly where we want. I'm going to go with an 800 pixel wide by 1100 pixel tall circle, or that's not circle, rectangle, with 20 pixel rounded corners. So we're going to just knock all these to 20 real quick. There we go, and we'll hit OK. And there is our shape. I can grab my Move tool here and just move this up and, I don't know, click it wherever I want, and it'll kind of click into place there. So what we'll do is we'll get rid of the stroke, which you can do here in the Properties panel. You can see there's the stroke. We'll select it, choose the cross icon to get rid of it, and then we'll select the fill, and I'm just going to select any old color. Let's just go with pink, because at this point, we're just creating shapes and aligning them. We'll figure out the color scheme and set the colors in a moment. So we have our first shape. Now what I want to do, I actually want to throw a drop shadow underneath this too while we're here working on this shape. We could do this later, but I want to do it now because it's a lock that I'm going to forget that later. Let's go Layer, Layer Style, Drop Shadow, and we're just going to apply a very, very subtle drop shadow here. We want it to be the color black. All right, I'm going to hit OK, and the angle of 90, I probably want to push it back a little bit, maybe closer to about 100. Let's go 120 degrees straight up, and then give it a distance of 2, a spread of 0, and a size of 2. So it's going to be a very, very subtle drop shadow. In fact, the opacity here, we need to reduce that to, let's go really low, like 15%. It's going to be a little tough to see because, well, if I get rid of the grid, you can sort of see it down there, but it's tough to see because we have this very light background and this pink is so bold. By the way, Command or Control and the apostrophe key, that will toggle your grid on and off. That might be helpful to memorize that as we're working through this tutorial. Let's come back to the shape tools here, and let's grab the ellipse tool. I'm going to click a single time because once more we'll create an ellipse of the size that we want to go with, and that'll be 400 by 400. There we go. Go ahead and create that shape. You can see it has the same pink fill. I don't want pink because I want to be able to see this. Let's maybe give this light blue, and then I'll grab the Move tool, and we want to kind of align this in the very middle of our pink card shape. So let's zoom in a little bit here. I just grabbed the magnifying glass tool here. I think I want to place this 6 cells from the top. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cells. So I'm just going to drag it down. Boom, it clicks right into place. And then we want to align it horizontally. Now we can do a couple things. We could just drag it until it looks like it's exactly horizontal, and we can see here it's 1 full cell plus 5 small cells, right? So you got 5 small cells, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Or you could load the rounded rectangle as a selection, and then up here in the move tool, you have all these alignment options. You could align that way as well. But here, this is how we want to do it. 6 small cells from the top, and then aligned horizontally perfectly in the middle of our card. This will be the profile picture of the person that we're creating this card for. And I think here as I'm looking at this, it's a little difficult to work with these really bright colors. So let me just show you how I find the color scheme. And actually, I already have the color scheme right here in my color schemes libraries panel here in Adobe Photoshop. But I'm going to jump out to Google Chrome. And here we've got color.adobe.com, color.adobe.com. And what I did was I came up here to Explore, right? So you hit the Explore tab. And then I just ran a search for Blue UI. And I'm going to commit to that. And the color scheme you're looking for is this Improved Flat UI by Frank. You can click on it. If you're using Adobe CC, you can just save it to your library, and Adobe Color is going to say, hey, which library would you like to save it to? I go with color schemes in this case because it's where I'm carrying these couple little color schemes, and then I hit save, and it transfers immediately to Photoshop, which is great. If you don't have Adobe Photoshop CC, you can screenshot this, or right here and right now, I will overlay the colors with their hexadecimal codes on the screen right now, so you can pause this video and you can screenshot that if it's a little bit easier for you. So now that we have these colors, it's a time to just swap the color of our shapes. So the pink rounded rectangle, all we have to do is click on the color swatch. This light gray is what we want it to be, and you can see it swaps the fill to that. If I shut off the grid, you can see there's the card, and now we can really see our little shadow that we created. It helps just pop it off the background a little bit. Now the ellipse, the color of this doesn't really matter at all because there's going to be a photo in this. But I think before we apply the photo here, let's go ahead and duplicate this shape. So let's just select that ellipse, hit Command or Control J to duplicate it. Let's select the lower shape, and I'm going to call this avatar border. And we're going to change the size of this. So we're going to open up our properties panel. We can hit this little chain link icon because we want both of these to change in unison. And we're going to set the size to 440. So the reason we increased this by 40 pixels on both sides, width and height that is because each of our little cells here, whoops, let me just zoom in. Each of our little cells is 20 pixels. Remember, each main grid is 100 pixels by 100 pixels divided by 5. That means each of these small squares is 20 pixels by 20 pixels. So we're basically making a 20 pixel border. So the reason I went 40 pixels in size is because you need to have the border on both sides of the shape, top and bottom. So what we're going to do here is I'll change the color of this border. Let's just give it like this heavy blue so we can see what's going on here. You can grab your move tool, and it should be very easy to just pop it up and pop it over, and we get a perfect border. And you can see because it's 20 pixels, it's going to align perfectly and snap to our grid exactly as it should on all 4 sort of sides of this ellipse, if you will. All right, so let's zoom out a little bit, and let's drag in the photo that we're going to use. So I'm going to pop out to the Finder, and I've got this photo here. I'm going to use an editorial photo of Margot Robbie. We're going to create sort of this social media card for her, if you will. I'm going to commit the change to place her. I'm going to drag her up above the ellipse, and I'm actually going to double click on this ellipse here, and I'm going to name it Avatar because this is the actual avatar. And we can shut off the grid temporarily here so we can get a good look at what we're working on. Select Margot's photo, and we're going to use the hotkey Command Option or Control Alt G to clip her photo within our avatar. Or our avatar shape, I should say. And now we can just simply drag her around and place her exactly where we want. I'm going to hit Command or Control T to free transform. I'm going to free transform a little bit so we can get a little bit more of her face in there. And something like that probably would be the crop of the photo that we use, and that looks great. Well, if you're enjoying what you're seeing here, consider supporting the channel by picking up a copy of my Photoshop course. A link will appear up in the top corner. It's like 9 hours of Photoshop goodness. You'll enjoy it if you're a graphic designer, where there's all kinds of like intermediate and advanced Photoshop techniques that get covered. A lot of cool stuff gets made. Just check it out in the link. You can check it out. You'll see examples of a lot of the stuff that gets covered. It's a bunch of hours of good stuff, and you help support tutvid.com if you pick up a copy of that course. And if you do, thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. Let's get back to the tutorial. And what we'll do here is we'll change the color of the border here to the lightest gray that we had. Now, part of the problem is the card itself, we set the background or the fill of the card to the lightest gray. I think what we're going to do is set the background of our card to just solid white. So we can change the color here by just double clicking on the shape layer's thumbnail. It's going to bring up the color picker. We can just say, you know what, go solid white. It's going to be a subtle difference, but you can see it in there, right? The border is very subtle. It's a very subtle gray. The difference is in the details, as they say. Let's select the avatar border layer here, and we're going to give this a drop shadow as well. So let's go layer, layer style, drop shadow. And here we're going to go with a color of black. Opacity, we'll leave it at 15 for the moment. In fact, I'll move this over so I can see what I'm doing here. We're going to set the angle to 90 degrees. I want it to be straight up and down, and you can see the distance is 602, which is why we're getting this wayward circle down here. I want the distance to be probably like 3. I want it to be a little bit more than it was. So I'll go like 3 and 3 pixels and a size of 3. And I think the 15% opacity looks great. It's just a nice subtle drop shadow. It helps kind of pop the bottom of the avatar. It looks nice. We're going to hit OK there. And now what we're going to do, if I go back and look at my reference file, we're going to create these buttons down here along the bottom. We're going to do that by creating or duplicating our card shape. But I'm going to turn my grid back on. That's Command or Control and the apostrophe key. So I'm going to grab that rounded rectangle, and I'm going to hold down Alt or Option. I'm going to drag it all the way up to the top here. It's covering up everything. Don't worry. That's fine. This is where things get kind of interesting. Well, first and foremost, let's right-click on this layer and choose to clear the layer style. That's going to just get rid of that drop shadow. We don't need it for this shape. This is where things get kind of fun. Grab the rectangle tool, and we're going to actually cut this shape. So we're only going to preserve the part on the bottom that we need, the part that's going to actually be the buttons. So I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. I think I want this to be 8 cells up from the bottom. So these buttons will have a height of about 160 pixels. So we got 5, and 5 plus 3 is 8. So right there is where we want the top of the buttons to be. Okay, that's good to know. We can zoom out here. Now what I'm going to do is hold down my Alt or Option key. You see when I do that, I get that little minus next to the little cursor icon. That means we're going to be cutting away, and we have the top rounded rectangle shape selected. So I can just hold down Alt or Option, but you can see part of the difficulty is also when you hold down Alt or Option, you create a shape and drag it out from the center. I don't want that. I want to drag it from the top corner. So the trick is you hold down Alt or Option, you begin clicking and dragging, and continue dragging, but let go of the Alt or Option key. See how the cursor still has the little minus icon next to it? That's great. All right, let's move down until we are 8 cells up from the bottom, right? 8 is what we picked, and I let go, and you can see all of a sudden we see Margot again, but it doesn't look like anything's happened, and that's because we need to change the fill shape of this rounded rectangle. In fact, let's do that right now by just simply selecting the darkest blue we have in our color scheme, which is this guy right here, and you can see we have this little bar we've created, because this rectangle shape that we're looking at, that's just cutting away the part of the rounded rectangle that's intersecting with that. Therefore, as you can see here in the thumbnail, only leaving that little bit of a rounded rectangle on the bottom. So a nice little trick there. If you don't like the idea of having 2 shapes on this one shape layer, 2 paths on the one shape layer, we can grab the path selection tool here, that's the black arrow, and just drag out a selection over the whole bit. You can see the actual rounded rectangle is still underneath there. See, they're the top corners of it, and that's not the shape on the bottom. This is all part of the same rounded rectangle layer that we're working on. If you want to kind of merge these together, what you can do is select them both with this path selection tool, and then up here in the control bar, right here, we've got this little icon. Select that and choose to merge the shape components. And you can see here, Photoshop's going to say, look, you're going to take a live shape, turn it into a regular path. You want to do it? Yep, we do. And there we go. We just have this nice little compact trim, perfect to the pixel path down there at the bottom of our info card. We can name this button bar or whatever we want to call it at this point. Well, if you can spell button correctly, that might be helpful. There we go. All right, let's zoom in on this button bar here, and we're going to place the vertical lines that are going to kind of segment the buttons out. So I'm going to grab the Align tool, and I'm going to set the weight of it here. Well, I already have the weight set to 2, which is exactly what I want. I'm going to go with 2 pixels. All right, what we're going to do is we're going to place our 2 vertical lines 13 cells in from the left and the right. So I've got 5 cells, 10 cells, 11, 12, 13 cells. So right there, I'm going to start clicking and dragging, hold down Shift, drag, and even the line will click to the grid that has been set here. So you'll get a perfect shape, and I can now just click on that medium blue, and there we go. Now we have our line medium blue. Let's go 5 cells, 10 cells, 11, 12, 13 cells. Right there on that grid line, hold down Shift, and boom, that's going to click right into place. All right, if I hide the grid, we can see here we've got these 2 nice lines. Now, they might be a little bit too pronounced, and if they are, you can always reduce the opacity of these layers. And if I do that, I'll probably, I'll reduce them down to like, I don't know, 20%. Let's do something that's pretty subtle here. I think subtlety will look good. So let's go 20% and 20%, that's good. And we can name these layers to vert lines, something like that, just so when we're looking back on this file, we know exactly what we're dealing with. It helps a lot to really just name your shape layers so you know exactly what you're working with. So far, things are looking pretty good. So next up, let's create the follow button. We're going to turn the grid back on using that Command or Control and the apostrophe key. I'm going to zoom in because we're going to place a button down here that says follow, and we will grab once more the rounded rectangle tool. I'm just going to click a single time, and what we'll do is I'm going to give this like 280 pixel width by 100 height, and we'll go with the corner radius of, well, let's roll with 20 pixels because that's what we've got everywhere else. If 20 pixels looks a little big for the small button, we could back it off to like 15 and see. Yeah, you know what? Actually, 15 might look a little better. Let's go with 15 there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to position this button so it is centered horizontally. So I can see I've got 2 big cells on either side and then 3 small cells. So that's exactly in the middle right there. That's perfect. And I want this to be maybe a little bit closer here to the bottom button bar. So let's maybe just position it 2 small cells above the bottom bar. Let's back out. And if that's where the follow button sits, I think that'll kind of look good. So let's zoom in here. And what I want to do, I want to throw a quick drop shadow on this button. So I'm just going to call this follow. And we're going to go layer, we're going to go layer style, we're going to go drop shadow. So I'm going to go with a dark color. I'm going to bump the opacity up to 100% right off the bat. But I'm going to give this the color of 477 DB3. And you can see this is that medium blue really is what we're using. And you can see right there when I hover over 477 DB3 is what we've got. We're going to hit OK. And what I want to do is I really don't want there to be any blur on this. So I'm going to set the size to 0. And I'm just going to set the distance to something like 5. So it's just going to give us a nice little bump down. Now the color of the actual button needs to be changed so we can see what this shadow looks like. But we'll do that in just a moment. Let's hit OK. And we still have the follow button selected, so all we need to do to change the color is we want this to be the lightest blue, so we'll just click on the lightest blue, and there you go. There's the follow button with a little bit of a shadow or fake flat shadow beneath it, and it's ready to take the text. We're going to work on the text in just a moment. We just want to get all these shapes out of the way for the moment. Hey, just another quick break. If you are on Instagram, make sure you're following me. My handle is @tutvid, and I'll have a little bug pop up somewhere here on the screen that'll direct you to just the right place. And speaking of shapes, probably one of the last shapes we need to deal with is we're going to add a little circle up in the top corner for sort of the verified users. See this? We're going to create this little check icon. We're going to do this by creating, first and foremost, a blue ellipse. So I'm going to click once, and we're going to make this like 60 pixels by 60 pixels. I think that'll be a good shape, or a good size, I should say. And let's grab our move tool, and I'll move this to like, yeah, let's go two cells from the top, 2 cells from the right edge. I think that'll work perfectly. Now, we want to add a check icon to this. Now, I'm not going to design the icons. There's a great website where you can get all kinds of free icons, and I'll link to every icon that we're using. But these are the 5 icons that we're going to use in our design. A little verified check icon, a navigation icon, and then this message, like, and media icon. We're going to use all these icons, and I download the collection. I usually download as an EPS, because EPS is awesome and you can scale it up and scale it down and do all kinds of beautiful things. And you just want to make sure if you're not paying for a subscription for the site, make sure you credit the authors and designers of these icons because they do a lot of hard work for some amazing stuff that they're willing to give away. So more than happy to give these guys a shout out as well. And I'll like I said, I'll include links to every one of these 5 icons that I use. It'll be in the bio to this video so you can download them. Now I have already downloaded them. I have them here. They're all these EPS files. So we'll begin with this tick inside circle. I will drag it into Photoshop right there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to size it down. So I'm going to hold down Shift and Alt. Let me Shift and Option on the Mac, and a size right around there looks about right. If I have to make it a little smaller, I can. Let's zoom in up here, and I do need to make it smaller, so Command or Control T again. And let's make it a little smaller. Something like that works. And then we can just grab our move tool and use our arrow keys and nudge it up until it looks like it's right about in the center. Aligning a shape like this probably isn't going to work because it's a little, it's kind of asymmetrical because you got this check shooting out to the one side, but you really just, you want the circle to be what's aligned. So it's something that really you're probably going to want to just align by hand and make sure that it looks good. And there, I think it looks great. And in order to change the color of this, we could edit the EPS file, but we're going to just stick with what we're doing here in Photoshop. I'm going to move my libraries panel up a little bit. Let's create a new solid color layer here. Let's go solid color, and I'm going to choose, I want to choose this lightest gray as the color, but it's difficult to do that with the color picker open. So hit OK, and then just simply select that lightest gray. And now we've got this solid color layer above the tick inside circle layer. Use the hotkey Command Option or Control-Alt-G to clip it, and you can see we have a nice, beautiful verified badge up in the top right corner of our UI profile card. Now we begin talking about text, and this is where things are going to get fun. So I'm going to use pretty standard fonts. I'm going to hit the letter D just to get me back to a foreground color of black, and I'm going to grab my type tool. And I'm going to begin typing out. Let's begin with her name. Let's go Margot Robbie. I hope I spelled that right. And I want to make sure here in the paragraph panel that I'm aligning this to the center. That's pretty important. And then here in the character panel, I'm just going with a Helvetica font. If you're on the PC or you don't have Helvetica, you can go with Arial. You can choose just some simple, beautiful, elegant font is what you want to roll with. In this case, a sans serif font is probably going to work much better than going with some, book style or Garamond or Times New Roman, something that has those little serifs. We don't want that. We want it to be very clean and just sharp and, kind of look a little techy as well. Now, before we begin changing sizing or font weight, let's just place, that'll be our heading text. I'm going to hold down Alt or Option and drag out a copy of this, and I'm going to paste in a little bit of info here from her IMDb, just a line or two, and I'm going to double click on this, and this will be sort of the bio, and you can see here, well, this actually is going to present us with an interesting problem. You can see we just have one line of text, and it's just this crazy line of text that never stops, but we need our text obviously to fit within our little card. Well, check this out. If we right-click on this layer, we can convert this to paragraph text. And what that's going to do is now when we double-click on it, we have this box around the text. So what I can do is zoom out, and I can say, look, we want this box to be a bit more narrow. It can be a bit deeper, right? But we need this to be nice and narrow because we ultimately need the text to fit. I'm holding down Command or Control, by the way, when I drag this text box. We need this to be able to fit here on our little card. So something like about that wide is probably going to work great. I should probably honestly turn the grid back on, Command and the apostrophe key, and let's just kind of snap this to our grid, and then we'll stretch it out just like that. So now you can see it's perfectly aligned with the grid, and really the height of it doesn't matter as much because we're going to change the size of it in just a moment. So let's begin with the header. Whoops, I clicked off Photoshop for a second. Let's begin with the header right here, and I'm actually going to drag this above her bio text because I find it's easier if I keep the text stacked kind of naturally, if you will. The header is going to be right here underneath her picture, so it's nice to just have that kind of stacked on top in the layers panel. We're going to go to the character panel, and immediately I know I need to change the size. I'm going to knock this down to like 60 points. I think that'll be a great size for that, and it's a little too bold, so let's not go with medium. Let's go with a light Helvetica. That looks great. Let's drag this over. Let's drop it in place, and we'll just kind of move it so it looks like it's centered about exactly as it should be horizontally, and then we'll make it maybe about 2 small cells from the bottom of the border. Right, so the top of the R right there, the top of the R, the top of the M are going to be 2 small cells or 40 pixels from the bottom of the border of our avatar. That looks great. And now the body text, the way that I like to figure out my sizing is I've gone with 60 points for the header. So I'm going to bring up the calculator here on the Mac. If you have an iPhone, you can bring up the calculator just right there on your desk. And I'm going to go 60, and I'm going to divide this by the golden ratio, 1.618. This is just a great way to figure out, hey, what's a nice font size? So that's 37. We can try 37. I feel like 37 is still going to be a little bit large. Yeah, see, that still looks like it's a little bit too big, right? It should still be a little smaller. So let's divide this 37, and we're ignoring everything after the decimal number. We're going to divide this by 1.618. And this is going to get me 22.9. We round up to the nearest, which would be 23. So let's try a size of 23 instead. And that looks great. Look at that. That just fits in there so perfectly, so beautifully. There is a hyphen. I don't want a hyphen, so we're going to go to the paragraph panel, and there's hyphenate. We're going to check that off, and that's just going to bump Australia down to the next line. We can zoom in on this and just make sure once more that we're centered about properly in terms of horizontal spacing. Right about there is great. And now what I'm going to do before we do anything else, I'm going to hide the grid for a quick second. I am going to select this, and we have right now the bio text selected. I think I want to just make this that dark blue color instead of black. See how that just kind of blends nicely with what we've got going on? We'll do the same thing here with her name. Give it that darker blue or the darkest blue that we have. That looks pretty good. At this point, you can play around with the spacing. And maybe we want to move this a little bit closer to her name, or maybe we don't want it to be quite as close. Something like that I think will work. And that looks pretty cool. Of course, you could center it vertically as well between the bottom of her name and the top of what's going to be the follow button. But I think I like the way that looks. That's pretty cool. All right, now we're going to put sort of a location marker up here above her avatar. So we'll duplicate this bit of text. Actually, you know what? We'll just duplicate the heading. So I'm going to hit Command or Control J, and I've got this heading on top. I'm going to drag that up. I want this to be the location text because here we're, again, corresponding the stack of our layers to the actual position of the text on the document. So this location is going to be at the top. So we're going to type in, let's go like New York City, NY, so New York City, New York. And we're going to set this to also be the size of the body text, which I believe was 23, right? I'm going to turn the grid back on. Let's make sure we have this centered. Actually, it's pretty centered as it is because we have the text alignment centered, so it's going to just size down in accordance with that. What we could do is just make sure we're a healthy distance above the top of that border, so maybe a full one cell above the top of the border. Give us a 20 pixel buffer there. That's great. And what we need to do now is go back out to our Finder and drag the navigation EPS icon in. So we'll drag that in, and you can see it's solid black. We'll change the color in a moment. I want to change this to 5% of the width and height. We're going to hit the little chain link icon so both change in unison. Hit 5%. There we go. Commit that change. Drag this little icon up, and we'll just place it right next to the word New York City. And let's give this a solid color layer as well. So we'll create a new solid color layer, and I'm going to hit OK. And I believe this is already that darkest blue, which is exactly what I want. And then we'll just clip it to the navigation by Command-Option-G, Control-Alt-G on the PC. And that looks great. So now the icon is the same color as the word. Let's duplicate the main title once more, Command or Control J, and I'm going to drag this all the way to the bottom beneath the bio text, and we're going to physically drag this down because this is going to be the follow button. So I'm going to double click, and I'm just going to type out follow. There we go. Hit the check icon to commit that change. Now, the follow text, I don't want to be as small as the body text. So let's jump back to the calculator real quick. What was 60 divided by 1.618, I believe it was like 37. Yeah, 37. So let's just set this to 37. So let's bump this down to 37, something like that. Yeah, actually, that'll work pretty much perfectly. Let's align it horizontally. Again, a lot of text. It's just a lot easier if you kind of manually align it and make sure it looks right. This, I think I'm also going to change the weight from light. Let's bump this up to something like bold. So I'll go bold. And I think we also should just change the fill from the dark blue to the lightest gray we have. Yep, that again looks like it just fits, right? So there we go. So now all we have left to do are place the icons and the text down here on the bottom bar, and this is going to be kind of fun. Let's turn the grid on, and what we'll do is we will drag all three of our final icons in. Now I'm going to set these icons. I basically want them to go. The messaging, which is this paper airplane, is going to be over here on the far right. So we're going to change the size of all of these kind of the same. So I'm going to hit that little chain link icon here. Let's go with 13%. It's just what I picked out that kind of works. And I'm going to begin. There's my vertical bar. I know it's difficult to see, but it's in there. So I'm going to set this icon right in the exact middle. You can see I've got 3 cells below, 3 cells above. And I'm going to nudge this to the right 4 times while I'm holding down Shift. So I'm holding down Shift and I tap the right arrow key. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's going to put this 40 pixels in, or the equivalent of 2 cells in, off of that vertical bar. I'm going to hit the check icon. We've placed the first icon. All right, so the second icon, hit the chain link icon. We're going to go 13%. And I'm going to drag this guy over, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to bump it over 40 pixels. Looks good. Commit that change. And now for the heart, once more, we're going to reduce this to 13%. We're going to drag this guy down. Right there is that vertical bar, 1, 2, 3, 4, to knock it 40 pixels off of the bar. All right, if I just shut off my grid real quick, we can see we've placed these 3 icons, and they're all evenly placed on our bottom button bar, just using the simple move tool in Photoshop. I've got these icons just kind of randomly placed here in my layers panel. I'm going to drag these up, and what I want to do is group all of these. So I'm going to hit Command or Control G, and I'm going to name this Icons Button Bar or something like that. The reason I'm doing this is because I want to color these. I want to give these all that red color that we have in our color theme. But instead of creating a solid color layer for each icon, I can create one solid color layer right there. And right now it's that very light gray. That's fine. Hit Command Option or Control Alt G and clip the solid layer to that entire group of layers, and it'll colorize all 3 icons. And in this case, we simply click the red, and there we go. We have these nice, cool red icons. Next, we're going to add the text to this. So let's grab the type tool. I could duplicate, I guess, the text from like up here, but let's just begin by creating a new text here. And I'm going to type out the word posts. posts, there we go. And I'm going to hit enter return, and I'm going to say 635. So 635 posts. And what I want to do here is just select this or activate the text editing mode. Select the 635, and we want to color this. We want to make it the light gray in our color scheme here. So I'm going to just open up Colorize here, and we can actually sample it right here off of the border for our avatar. We can hit OK, F7, FB, FC. There we go. Hit the check icon, and I can move this text up and place it next to the icon. Now, obvious problem is the text is way too big. So what we'll do is we'll set it to what we've been setting the rest of our text to. Then it'll be 23 for the body text. And I don't know if I want bold. I think I'll go with medium, which will walk a nice line between the bold of the follow, but the kind of light of the body text and the location. I think that works pretty well. And we'll just move this over. And if I turn the grid on, we can place it with, fairly decent precision here, or we can move it right over so it's touching the edge of the icon and just move it like 20 pixels. 1, 2, hold down shift and tap the right arrow key twice. Move it about 20 pixels off of that icon. That's great. Hold down Alt or Option now and duplicate this over, because now we're going to work with the favorites. So I'm going to just highlight this. We're going to have to realign because all of this text is center aligned. I'm going to type out favorites. And on the next line, I'm going to highlight this, and I'm going to go like 3,472 or something like that, and make sure the F is just touching the edge of the heart, and hold down Shift and tap the right arrow key twice. Great, there that is. And then we'll do the same thing here. Hold down Alt or Option, duplicate this text for what's going to be messages. So we'll go messages. Oops, I actually want to hit Escape, undo that. I want to just make sure I highlight favorites because I want to maintain the white text or the really light gray text down here without deleting that. So we'll go messages, and then down here I'm going to highlight this, and we'll go like 1200 and 993 or something. That's cool. And I'll just boom, boom, hold down Shift, and that was 2 taps of the right arrow key, and we get our text just in place, just like that. And the final thing we'll do here is select the bottom rounded rectangle shape. This will be sort of our base. We can even name it base if we want. Hold down Shift to select the topmost layer. Hit Command or Control G to group these, and we'll call this a UI card. And we'll go select all to just ring our entire document with a nice little selection. And we will align this vertically and horizontally right to the middle of our document. So there it is. That is a simple UI card in Photoshop. It took a little bit of time, but we really went through and explained and talked about the different shapes, how to add and align, and the text and the sizing and the colors and everything that went into it. It was a whole bunch of fun though, wasn't it? So for creating this simple flat UI design, profile, card, avatar, holding, information, whatever you want to call it, that's it. Get it, got it, good. Nathaniel Dodson, tutvid.com. I'll catch you in the next one. And before you go, make sure you subscribe to my channel for more great tutorials every day. Also, buy my course. It helps us do what we do, and this channel is supported by viewers just like you. You can also just click the thumbnail and watch another video from this channel. See you next time, guys.